My great-granduncle General Sir John Monash, born John Mussolini in Australia. 2023. Monash, formerly John Mussolini at birth, before his adoption. My great-granduncle, my grandmother's uncle. The lack of factual information in publicly available records about my ancestors and family, particularly on the internet, can be very frustrating, to put it mildly. I have decided to clarify some details, regardless of how the people who read what I write react to the text. I am General Sir John Monash, great-grandnephew. He was my grandmother's uncle and my great-grandfather's brother with the same father. There are small but important details about him being historical family of mine that are very frustrating to attempt to explain. My Indigenous Australian great-great-grandfather's name was Alessandro Mussolini, who was a native of Gippsland. He had 3 sons with 3 separate females, including John, Vincente, Sir John, and Benito. All Yarrayalu Gunnakonai community boys at birth, in Latrobe Valley, Gippsland. The old city of Yarragon Pre, 1858 area. When Benito was born, Alessandro was married to his mother. When Benito was young, Alessandro decided to emigrate to Italy with his wife. Vincente, my great-grandfather, decided to stay home in Gippsland with his indigenous relatives. He changed his surname, legally, from Mussolini to the surname Lingiari, for cultural reasons. Lingiari is a term associated with a daddy long-leg spider. Indigenous Australians moved from what is now Antarctica to Australia, which was uninhabited by humans at the time, between 60 and 70,000 years ago. The move was caused by a crust sphere shift on Earth that was the result of a meteorite, or series of them, hitting Earth's crust. Many cultures have similar ancestral recollections of the same event. The crust sphere shift event at the time caused a complete polar shift, where everything on the planet shifted around 180 degrees with a variance north to south or south to north. Antarctica and Australia were in the northern hemisphere before the meteors hit, with Australia at the North Pole and uninhabited by humans and Antarctica next to it. Both ended up the other way around in the southern hemisphere after the polar shift movement stopped. Antarctica slipped into a majority polar night scenario, approximately, in the southern hemisphere the following morning, with what is now Australia next to it in a much warmer climate. Everything had to be moved, including all the animals and plants. The daddy long legs species of spider got a ride on my direct ancestors' bodies to get here, amongst other species of course. Different combinations of animals and plants moved, depending on the ancestors. It must have been very confusing for people who lived near the equator to suddenly feel strangely vaguely upside down and on the other side of things, or spun around on the spot 180 degrees, and everywhere in between to the total of the shift around the equator. Perhaps some of them decided to sit down with their legs crossed and wait to be flipped again. Vincente married a female called Deborah from the Yorta Yorta, Murray River Northwest Victoria, community, leading to my direct ancestor, my grandmother Myrtle Lingiari, the Mussolini, Sir John Monash niece, who had 2 indigenous parents. General Sir John Monash had 1 indigenous Gippsland parent, Alessandro. Alessandro intended to emigrate to Italy with both John and his son to his current wife, Benito. They prepared to do so. When they contacted Italian authorities about emigrating to settle the details, they were told that Alessandro could only take his child to his current wife and would not be able to bring any others to previous relationships with him, due to Italian immigration laws. In the meantime, a couple called Mr. and Mrs. Monash had emigrated from Europe specifically to run a boarding school and orphanage in the state capital of Victoria. They immediately moved into it to familiarize themselves. They were from the Poland Germany region and became well known in the local Jewish community. Alessandro decided to emigrate anyway, only being able to take his wife and their son Benito, who was born in my hometown at birth, the town of Yarragon in Gippsland. They decided to place John in the orphanage run by the Monash couple before leaving, and abruptly emigrated, leaving John behind in the orphanage with the bags they had packed for him to take him to Italy. Before suddenly leaving, they managed to get word to his half-brother Vincente that he had been left behind in an orphanage. Benito cried all the way to Italy, after assuming his brother John would be coming with him. Vincente, on the other hand, was excitedly thrilled to be reunited with his brother, absolutely ecstatic he had been left behind, with hugging and cheering. Not completely oblivious to him being in an orphanage, but cheering anyway. John was lucky enough to have an ongoing personal relationship with his half-brother Vincente when growing up. The Monashs eventually made the decision to shut the orphanage side of the business down. They mass-adopted all the children that were in their care at the boarding school that were associated with the orphanage in some way that had not been adopted from the orphanage out to new carers. All the children involved gained the surname Monash, including John, who was originally a Mussolini. John grew up as John Monash, studying various subjects during his formative years and eventually joining what became the Australian Army, obviously, as the old Yarrayalu and Gunnakonai Gippsland Army was no longer officially available. Benito went on to study in Italy and became the Prime Minister of Italy in October 1922, approximately, bizarrely enough. The Benito Mussolini of Italy. He was abducted, abused, murdered, and replaced with an imposter in Italy during World War II. I have a definite hunch a certain fake physicist was involved for sure. Unfortunately, the imposter can be easily seen strung up dead in a town square in Italy as if the real Benito dead using a simple internet search with the vile images appearing without any warnings. It is still labeled as if the real Benito. Vincente, my great-grandfather, and John, his half-brother, were in regular contact with each other during their youth on a lot of occasions via truancy and other issues. John was a single homosexual man when World War I was officially declared. His official next of kin was his brother Vicente, my great-grandfather, made official before John left to serve in World War I. He was involved in operations in Turkey, France, and Egypt, as everyone knows. A foreign military official once described John as the greatest living Australian.